Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 12, 2014 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my distinct pleasure to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you have not already done so and would like to avail yourself of a copy, please do so. You can follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda, as well as a segment under item 4, which is reserved for public comments and questions of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on our agenda tonight. It is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this juncture, I'd like to ask everyone to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Outstanding. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin? Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3, which pertains to minutes of prior council meeting minutes. And we have 2 sets of minutes to review and approve tonight. First, our council meeting minutes from our regular meeting of August 5th, 2014, and also the minutes of our August 5th, 2014 long-range planning meeting. Are there any questions, comments, corrections, or changes from any members of the village council? Seeing that there are none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Terrific. And that brings us right to item 4, public comments with respect to general items. Is there any members of the audience that have any questions, comments with respect to matters of a general nature? That is, items not appearing on our business agenda tonight. I would invite you to please approach the podium, give us your name and address, and we would welcome hearing from you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Village Council. My name is James Joseph. I have the privilege to serve as the Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management at DuPage County under the leadership of Chairman Cronin. Thank you for the opportunity to take a few moments this evening. One thing that we thrive on in government, as this council and staff very well know, is the nature of partnerships. And with what I do at the county on the emergency management side, with a number of other initiatives that I am responsible for, I could not do my job without partnerships. So the reason I stand here tonight is to highlight to you, Mr. Mayor, to the board, and also to the esteemed staff here of how great a partnership I personally, as the Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, have experienced with the Village of Downers Grove. And there's a couple of areas, if I could have just a moment to speak on. Obviously, your fire department, Chief Jackson, is well-known, well-respected. He serves as the president of the DuPage County Fire Chiefs Association. I initially met Chief Jackson going back about a year ago after the tragedy, a year and a half ago after the tragedy that occurred in Sandy Hook. Our DuPage County State's Attorney Bob Berlin, our Regional Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Rossetti, and myself formed a school safety task force. And working with Chief Jackson and a number of other law enforcement, fire, and EMA professionals, we were able to develop certain and specific standards that we were able to roll out to all of our superintendents of schools over the last year, and we're continuing to meet and to do so as the next school year approaches. So we've had a great working relationship with your fire chief. Obviously, Chief Porter on the police side have had an excellent working relationship with him as well, both on the Fiat side as well as with the DuPage County Police Chiefs. And I'm excited to say that with the DuPage County Police Chiefs, we've had the opportunity to establish a new incident management training program that we're going to be working on with police in the future. And as well on the emergency management side, I have to acknowledge Mary Pratt and the great relationship that we have with her. I recognize that she is in the room this evening. Mary not only has an excellent reputation in DuPage County, but that's statewide as well. I've traveled to Springfield and to Urbana with her at different conferences, and the reputation that she has statewide speaks high volumes of the level of staff that you have here in Downers Grove. So I wanted to acknowledge her as well. And what prompted me to want to come here tonight is the full-scale police and fire exercise that, as you very well know, took place at Midwestern University last month. The amount of time that I know my staff worked with Mary and her planning for that, her preparation for that, and to see how everything kind of came together on a Friday, a hot Friday last month, was amazing. Lieutenant Shannon Gillette as well on the police side worked very closely with my staff and we with Mary on a number of areas. And I just wanted to come in and say thank you, because I know that it's not often, it's very often that the complaints may come before the board here, or to the mayor's office, or to the village manager's office, but it's not always that the accolades are received in such a public forum. So I just wanted to, on behalf of DuPage County, on behalf of Chairman Cronin, extend my thanks to all three of those agencies that we work so closely with, and wanted to relay that to you here tonight, Mr. Mayor. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I've had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Fieldman about this as well, and our relationship, I think, can only get stronger from here, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Terrific. Well, Mr. Joseph, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come down here tonight and share those kind words with all of us. It's unfortunate that in this day and age we have to conduct such exercises and be prepared for such things like the type of horrific events that you mentioned, but it's good to know that we have such great partnerships with DuPage County and working through Chairman Cronin's office and our own outstanding first responders here in emergency management, that we have that kind of cooperation and collaboration that makes us about as best prepared as we can be, and prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and
Absolutely.
avoid it if you can.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate the partnership, and we're glad that that we get this kind of recognition, because it's well-deserved, it's hard-earned and well-deserved, and please extend our appreciation not only to yourself standing here before us, but also to Chairman Cronin for communicating that message. We appreciate it.
I will do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments of a general nature from any members of the audience? Any questions or comments with respect to items not appearing on our agenda tonight? Questions or comments of a general nature? Hearing no further ones, we'll move to item 5 on our agenda, which is reserved for council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the village council to report out on items of interest to the community or other goings-on. We'll start this evening with the very dapper-looking Commissioner Barnett.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, Mayor, I did want to take a moment. As many of you know, before I was on this council, I served as student body president of the University of Illinois in 2010-2011, my senior year there. And it was a great honor to serve there, and a great state university, this state. One of my successors as student body president, Brock Gebhardt, who served from 2011 to 2013, unfortunately passed away this past weekend, this past Thursday, in a car accident. A good friend of mine, was a really tough incident, especially because the reason he passed away was he was driving when drunk behind the wheel. And I just, it was one of those moments for me Thursday evening when I received the news. Incidentally, I was sitting on the stuck Metro train because of the pedestrian incident that occurred that day when I received the news, and it reminded me of the importance of just sharing the message that in these summer months when we're all having fun, perhaps going to barbecues in the summer or stopping by our favorite local establishment, that if you've had a couple drinks, don't drink and drive. You can really injure yourself, others, and thank God in this case, he was driving. It was a one-car incident. There was nobody else in the car, so nobody else was injured or killed. But it's just a terrible tragedy for the family, for friends of us that knew him. I'm 23 years old, and life cut short as a result of drinking and driving. So to me, it was just a really poignant message, and a very emotional weekend down in Peoria for the funeral where he lived in Dunlap, just north of Peoria. So I just wanted to share that with my colleagues, with the audience here today, and with those watching on TV. That remember, we hear it all the time, and sometimes we get immune to these messages that, oh, well, don't drink and drive. Yeah, we know that. Oh, of course. Oh, we hear it all the time, an everyday thing. But it can really, when it hits close to home, it is, it's difficult, and it's really challenging, and it just reminded me of that importance that I've been sharing that with my friends, my family in these past few days, and I wanted to share it here tonight. So just ask for your prayers for that family and for all the families that this year and in past years have been affected by drunken driving. whether themselves, whether somebody been hurt or killed by a drunken driver. And remember to be safe when driving. Call a friend, call a family member, call a cab. There are options, and please don't drink and drive. That's all I have tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for that sobering reminder, Commissioner. Commissioner Jose?
No report, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Rankin?
I just wanted to remind everyone that there's a few events coming up. September 6th and 7th is the Downtown Downers Grove Art Festival. It's Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 5. And that same weekend, on September 6th, is the Grove Foundation Golf Outing. It's at the Downers Grove Park District course. It starts at 2, and you can get information at www.thegrovefoundation.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Neustadt?
Thank you, Mayor. I was honored and privileged to represent the village today at the 83rd Annual Lions Club New Teacher Luncheon. Today it was held at the Moose Lodge in town, and it was representatives from District 99, District 58, and Avery Coonley School there today. A lot of bright, energetic, young, new teachers in the room, as well as some of the seasoned old administrators there. We had a great luncheon. The Lions who were in attendance really kind of gave us a perspective on the event, and I think we decided that it's the longest continuous running event in Downers Grove at 83 years. So it was great to be there to welcome the new teachers to the village of Downers Grove and to their respective districts. It's always a fun event to attend because as we ask how many people have come back as students of one of the District 58 or 99 schools, a lot of hands go up. And I think that's a testament to all of the success that this village has had, not only with our school districts, but of course across the community and village-wide with our many, many awards and reasons why people are giving us awards, which is our schools, our community, our parks, our great things to do here in the village. So a great event to attend, and I wish the new teachers and even those old seasoned ones a great school year coming up. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and on behalf of all of us, thank you for so capably representing the village at the event. It is a terrific event, and glad that you were able to do that on our behalf. Greatly appreciated. I have nothing to report out with respect to item 5, so we'll move right to public hearings, which is item 6 on our agenda tonight. And we do have a public hearing tonight with respect to the Village of Downers Grove Multifamily Housing Revenue Bond, Series 2014. For those who have been following along, you may recall that this is continued from our August 5th, 2014 meeting. So first, I will go through what the procedures will be like for this public hearing. This public hearing, which is continued from August 5th, 2014, as just mentioned, will please come to order. The public hearing has been called by the Village Council of the Village of Downers Grove to consider issuance by the Village of Downers Grove Multifamily Housing Revenue Bond Series 2014 in aggregate principal amount not to exceed $20,114,920 with respect to the 120-unit supportive living multifamily housing facility located in the Village of Downers Grove. Notice of this hearing was published in the Downers Grove Suburban Life newspaper on July 16th, 2014. The procedures for tonight's meeting will be as follows, and there will be a test afterwards. 1, there will be a presentation by Jim Snyder, bond counsel for the Village of Downers Grove, who will present information related to the bond issuance. 2nd, there will be an opportunity for questions or comments from members of the Village Council. 3rd, there will be an opportunity for questions or comments from members of the public. These may include either written or oral statements, as well as any petitions or other documents or information relevant to this public hearing. And 4th and last, thereafter, we will adjourn the hearing. Please note that at this hearing, witnesses will not be sworn, and a verbatim written transcript of the statements or testimony given at the hearing will not be prepared. However, a recording of the procedures will be made on village equipment and retained until minutes of the hearing have been prepared and approved by the Village Council. And we will not need any reservation of rights from Major League Baseball for any of those written transmissions. All seriousness, all kidding aside, I would like to now proceed with the public hearing with the presentation from Jim Snyder, bond counsel for the Village of Downers Grove. We invite Mr. Snyder to please approach the podium and provide us with the presentation. Good evening, Mr. Snyder.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. It's good to be here again. We are bond counsel to the Village of Downers Grove with respect to this bond issue. This bond issue is a private activity bond. The borrower is Downers Grove Supportive Living, LLC. There is the bank, we have a commitment letter from a bank. The bank is going to be, the bond will be purchased by Heartland Bank and Trust Company. There will be no obligation on this bond to the Village of Downers Grove. Downers Grove is fully indemnified by the borrower. The hearing is required by federal income tax law, and tonight we're doing the first reading of the bond ordinance, which authorizes the mayor and staff to execute documents to enable this financing to move forward. And tonight we are also have in attendance Chuck Freeberg and Jim Martell, who are owners of the borrower, Downers Grove Supportive Living, LLC. And any questions or anything else I could help with, I'd be happy to answer.
Terrific, thank you. Well, as mentioned, let's begin with any questions or comments, initial questions or comments from the members of the Village Council on this item. Commissioner Olson.
So with this item is sort of a continuance, this is just a different legal entity from the public hearing we had previously in regard to private activity bonds regarding the supportive living facility. Is that correct?
Well, the borrower changed from, there was an ordinance adopted and a hearing last fall.
Right.
And that borrower has changed and the amount has changed. Those are the two changes. Last week, there was a hearing that was published in the paper, and we're continuing that
Right.
hearing.
But the difference from the fall, I guess, is what I...
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
so the borrower has changed. It's a different entity than
Yes.
previously came before us.
Yes.
Requesting these private activity bonds. Okay, thanks.
Other questions from members of the Village Council? The only thing that I will ask, because it's worth repeating, so I'm going to ask a few questions I already know the answer to. Number one, if this goes forward, there is no obligation to the Village of Downers Grove.
No obligation on the Village of Downers
And
Grove.
there's no guarantee that the village is engaging in, and there's no rights of recourse against the village in the event of default, correct?
No financial responsibility on Downers Grove whatsoever.
Essentially, we are acting as a conduit for this financing.
That's correct.
Right, it's just worth repeating because someone asks us that every single time.
Sure.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. So at this point, if there are any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to the subject of this public hearing, we would invite you to please come to the podium. I think I asked some of the questions that we're going to be asking. All right, very good. Then I will return to the Village Council for any final questions or comments. Of course.
Do these bonds appear when we have that whole list of bonds in our budget? These don't appear in any list that we would put out in our budgetary planning.
That's correct, they do not appear.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Sure, thank you. Any other final questions from members of the Village Council? All right, very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Snyder. Appreciate that. With
You're
that,
welcome.
I will declare this public hearing adjourned. Thank you. And we'll get there eventually. All right, that brings us to the end of the public hearing, as noted, and brings us to item 7 on our agenda tonight, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda this evening? Hearing none, seeing none. Any questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Olson.
First, on the item, the license agreement for temporary use of public property with the Educational Foundation of Downers Grove District 58 Oktoberfest. I'm going to abstain from that vote. I sit on the board of that foundation, and I believe it would be a conflict of interest for me to vote on this at the council level. So just wanted to note that for my colleagues and for the public that I plan to abstain from that item alone. Is that possible?
To make that happen, the item should be removed from the consent agenda and acted upon individually.
Well, then I would ask.
You probably shouldn't make that motion based on what you just said.
And
Someone
by,
else-
Yes.
by council rule, just the request automatically places it
Right.
separately.
Right, so it is now removed.
Okay.
So we'll come back to that separately. Are there any other questions or comments with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda other than item 7C, which has now been removed for separate consideration?
Mayor, just one question on this. The first contract the computerized fleet analysis software. Notice the purchase is unbudgeted. Do we have an estimate on the life cycle of this, the current product that we're purchasing? And is, based on that life cycle, might we include something in a future budget to update this when this product expires, as I'm sure it will?
Yes, the life cycle of this software is 5 years or more. In fact, the previous iteration has been in use for several years. And while it's not budgeted this year, it was contemplated in the equipment replacement fund over multiple years, and we really switched two projects. So the money is there, it's just this line item wasn't budgeted for this year.
Okay.
So we can clarify that in the next round of budgeting.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Other questions or comments on the items on the consent agenda other than 7C? Hearing none. Can I have a roll call, please, on the consent agenda minus 7C?
Yes. Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That consent agenda is modified, passes unanimously. Now, may I have a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing a license agreement for temporary use of public property with the Educational Foundation of Downers Grove, District 58, Oktoberfest?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments from the audience on that item? Questions or comments from members of the Village Council and Commissioner Newstead?
Since we took it off, I'll just add a special thank you to the Community Events Commission and another great event coming up here in Downers Grove to add to the list of wonderful things to do in our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Ditto. Any other questions or comments? We're looking forward to it, and thanks everyone for putting it together. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Passes 5 to 1 abstention. Very good. That brings us to item 8 on our agenda tonight, our active agenda. We have 2 items on our active agenda, 8A and 8B. First, do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance establishing and amending stop and yield sign locations at multiple intersections in the Village of Downers Grove?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to stop signs and yield signs? Any questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Rankin?
I'm not going to repeat everything I said last week, but I know a lot of my neighbors are so pleased to see this here, and I appreciate the changes that were made. And then I also wanted to mention that I was speaking to Manager Fieldman. He also said that the school zone striping would be ramped up a little bit to help with some of the problems with that around Lester School. So I'll be in support of this, and thank you for making those changes.
Terrific. Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, I guess I think that I don't have any issue with the proposed recommendations we're voting on tonight. In the discussion of long-term improvements, one of the long-term improvements that's discussed is improving congestion along arterial roadways, given that the congestion can lead to an increase in cut-through traffic, especially, I think, my own opinion, especially along Fairview Avenue. I know that's a long-term recommendation to continue to explore 55th Street, Ogden Avenue, Fairview Avenue. Do we have any sense of what specifically might be explored? Because I think, especially during the rush hour times, if you drive down Fairview Avenue, sometimes it seems like it's gridlocked from Ogden all the way down to the railroad tracks and even down to 55th Street. What item, when we say explore that, I mean, we can certainly think about it and say, oh, well, there should be something done, and I think everyone knows it, but what type of recommendations, are contemplated for the future of that roadway?
There's a couple of initiatives going on. We recently completed a study around the Maple Fairview intersection. We're also in the process of just starting to look at potential future underpasses, separated grade crossings. There's new technology with controllers that can improve the communication between the signals and the gate downtimes, things like that. So we continue to work with the county. We continue to work with potential future changes in grade crossings on those initiatives, as well as, I think, changes that may happen in the future at the Fairview area, as some recommendations from the comprehensive plan as well.
Okay. And then with regard to 55th Street, Mayor, if I may. The project that I know was contemplated by the county, I know we discussed, for example, the closure of Webster Street in that corridor, but what's the status of that project with the county?
There was a coordination meeting today between IDOT and the Federal Highway Administration on this project, and we anticipate a public meeting to be conducted sometime in the month of September that residents will be invited to come in. It's a requirement of the federal funding. It's something we would like to do as well, invite people to come in and look at the project and provide their comments. At the close of that meeting, the county will be wrapping up all their comments and updating the plans in response to IDOT comments, and we'll be resubmitting those plans for IDOT's review. They'll be starting Phase 2, actually kind of the construction drawings in 2015, with construction to begin as early as, I'd say, the second half of 2016 or early 2017.
So that's still a ways off then, but planning is underway.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Any other questions or comments on this item? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously and brings us to the other item on our active agenda, 8B as in boy. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending raffle provisions?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments on raffle provisions from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council regarding this item? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, that matter also passes unanimously and brings us to the end of our active agenda and on to item 9, our first reading or our workshop agenda, where items are presented for discussion and consideration purposes only, and potential action at a future date and time. We have 4 items on our first reading or workshop agenda tonight. As is customary, I'll ask Village Manager David Fieldman to please introduce the items.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. The first item for consideration is a motion awarding a contract for improvements, drainage improvements to Forest Avenue. Here to present information on this item is our Public Works Director, Nan Newland.
Good evening, and thank you.
Good evening again. A motion is requested to award a contract for the Forest Avenue Drainage Improvement Project to Swallow Construction Corporation of Downers Grove in the amount of $594,877.95. This is a project location map. As you can see here, we're going to replace the existing storm sewer on Forest Avenue from 41st Street to Herbert, which is currently in very poor condition, needs to be replaced. In addition to that, we will be installing permeable pavers and native plantings on a couple of locations shown here. I just turned it to the side. It's not north and south anymore, so I can show you a little bit better. North is to the left here. So these are the 2 locations where we're looking to put in some permeable pavers. They correspond with some low points in the road, which will assist with drainage and water quality improvements. And these were really put in response to comments and concerns from neighboring residents when we met with them at a public meeting, talking about addressing speeding in the on the street and to provide some traffic calming. In addition to that, we'll be resurfacing the road from 41st Street to 39th Street. The location shown in the circle, I just want to show you a little bit of a blow-up for that. This is what it'll look like on the street. The areas with the little grass, those are the depressional areas where we'll have a little bit of rain garden and some native plantings along the side of the road. You show the permeable pavers there. They'll connect right to the driveways there. The residents are all very much in favor of this. I think it'll be a benefit to their neighborhood, help reduce speed, and be an amenity for their street. As I said, we did go out to bid on this project. We received 3 bids. Swallow Corporation was the low bidder, and they completed the Oakwood Avenue Storm Sewer Replacement Project for the village in 2012. They were recently awarded and about to complete the 2014 Water Main Improvement A contract. Also well underway with the Hill and Grand headwall replacement, and have completed similar projects for the City of Aurora and the City of Yorkville. And staff recommends award of this contract to Swallow Construction Corporation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members of the audience regarding this project? Questions or comments from the Village Council? Commissioner Olson?
Sorry for a lot of questions.
You're going to get a triple-double tonight.
You know, I guess that's a good thing.
It is.
The stormwater system, I know, is in poor condition. Given the discussion we had last week at long-range planning about the stormwater system and the allocation between maintenance and capital, for what reason is the system in poor condition? I mean, is this one of these cases where we didn't maintain it for a number of years and it fell into disrepair or it wasn't built properly? I mean, I'd like to better understand that, and I think it could be informative as we consider the, further consider that long-range planning item.
We can
future.
provide you more information about that. We have televised the sewer and can provide you more information.
Okay, great. That would be helpful. And then, for the permeable pavers, what type of cost increase is that over if we were to just do a normal street the whole way? I mean, is it significantly adding to the cost, or is that a more minor cost to this project?
It adds about $15,000 for each of the two locations. So in addition to slowing traffic, it also assists with water quality filtration. It works in conjunction with the storm sewer system. So it really gives us the two benefits, similar to what you saw on Grove and Carpenter. It'll be the same type of application.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Barnett?
Yeah, just a comment, really not a question for Nan, but Commissioner Olson's question about, how we got to this condition, I'm sure there are some answers we all have, but I'll remind everybody, we just had this conversation again last Tuesday evening, and there was no decision made, to be sure, but there was absolutely a sentiment amongst the group that we were all kind of, not all, most of us, were cool with the idea of holding off or delaying getting to the point where we were conducting maintenance at the levels with which, from a technical standpoint, we know we should for the better part of, it depends on what you look, 13 to 15 more years. That's an oversimplified thing, to be sure, but it's something to everybody to continue to keep in mind. We see these things and exactly how we got here, exactly how long it took us, exactly which decision got us there, I don't know. But we're making ones now with a lot more recognition of what we could do. And I just encourage everybody to think and reflect on that a little bit. And 2 years from now, when we've got the next project and Commissioner Olson says, how do we get here? I'm hoping it's not as a result of us deciding to continue to delay maintaining things at the level which we know technically we probably should.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Is this the first time we've used permeable pavers with the intent of calming traffic?
Well, the Carpenter Grove application was our first application. So when you drive down Carpenter at the intersection of Grove, it'll feel just exactly like that, which is really, that's at an intersection. This will be at a straight road section. So it's probably the first application on a straight street like this, but Grove and Carpenter was our first application.
Is this something you anticipate doing more in the future?
I think there'll be more opportunities for it. I think in this case, it's able to do two functions at one time. So I'm not sure we would do it just to do it on a street where it didn't also provide the same stormwater BMP benefits as well. I think we'll be looking at each situation as we do projects and evaluating what the best application is. In some cases, we've done the bump outs, and kind of the chicanes, and you're kind of moved with the curbs. And this street doesn't have curb and gutter, so it doesn't really lend itself to those types of traffic calming applications as well. So I think each one we'll look at and recommend what we think is the best application for each situation.
Yeah, I had the same question as Commissioner Olson with regard to the additional cost. I mean, as you said, given the topography of the area, it makes sense because you're getting the stormwater benefit at a place where it's absolutely needed. I was surprised a little bit by the response to the question I'd submitted, that one of the primary purposes was traffic calming. I anticipated it to be more for the stormwater benefits. That was the genesis of my question. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Newstead.
I think it's just important to note, I don't know if I've said this in a while, this is a kind of a three-bundle project: storm sewer, street resurfacing, and traffic calming, all three priority things that we have been asking our staff to do, and we have it all on one stretch of roadway here. We come in, we take care of a lot of things at one time, disrupt the area maybe for one season of construction, and then we're out of there for a while. These kind of projects really allow us to get the best bang for the buck, not only with the construction, but then with the costs and the finances that go with it. So it's a great project. I look forward to it. I think the questions about the use of the permeable pavers are good, because it is kind of a different setup than we have down there at Grove and Carpenter. But using this stretch, this kind of used to be a shortcut, maybe still is for a lot of folks going around Highland Avenue. So I think the traffic calming on this roadway definitely will be welcomed by the residents, and I look forward to seeing how it works.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson.
Is this, am I correct, this is a one-way street?
Yes, it's one way to the north, and that's also challenging from a traffic standpoint, because there's no opposing traffic. It tends to make people feel like they can go a little bit faster.
Okay.
I'll just add a couple things, picking up on comments that my colleagues already made. First of all, with respect to the justification or reasoning for the replacement, obviously the capital project sheet for this project is part of the storm sewer replacement annual effort. It's SW-070 for those keeping track at home. And the description of the project summary indicates that the project accounts for future annual replacement of existing storm sewers which have reached the end of their useful life. But to the point that I think was made earlier, it'd probably be useful to understand why it's at the end of its useful life. Is it due to age? Is it due to the conditions? Is it due to design? Is it due to just the fact that that particular pipe just carries a lot of volume and so it wore down faster than others? I think that would be useful to know as we wade deeper into these stormwater projects, no pun intended. And that's probably something for the capital project sheets as well. That way, when they're here in our packet, we can look at it and see what the answer is, but that's useful. Although those generally show up on page something like 185 of the packet. It took me a while to get there. The other comment is, just to pick up what Commissioner Newstead said, and that is, this is a great example of bundling, trying to get three different things done at the same time. And while sometimes we may not necessarily have thought to put dollars into one of these three at this juncture, when the opportunity presents itself, I think it is wise, in fact, down there very smart, to take an opportunity of the disruption that's going on and the coordination and other potential savings that may take place from coordinating these projects to maybe advance something that otherwise would be done at a later point in time. We can't always do that, and it doesn't always make sense, but I'm very glad that you pointed out that this is a good opportunity of that being done in a very smart way. Anyway, after all that, any other questions or follow-up comments from any members of the audience? No? Terrific. Well, next item, please.
Will also be presented by Director Newland. It's an ordinance amending parking restrictions on Franklin and Elm.
Thank you. An ordinance has been prepared to amend a section of the village code concerning no parking anytime, April 1st to November 1st, along the east side of Elm Street between Prairie and Franklin Street, and on the south side of Franklin Street between Washington Street and Prospect Avenue. This item is being presented in response to requests from residents to address traffic issues related to congestion created by parking around the ball field at the southeast corner of Washington Park, which is where the softball field is located. When the park is in use, there is consistent parking along both sides of Franklin and Elm adjacent to the ball field. It's about a 26-foot wide street, I believe, and when you have two sides of parking, pretty much car after car, it leaves only room for one direction of traffic down each street. For this reason, two-way traffic is greatly constricted. Visibility is reduced because a lot of those parking cars park very close to the residents' driveways. And vehicular movement in both directions is difficult for motorists to navigate, including emergency vehicles. We also get people who are parking on the opposite side of the ball field to use the ball field darting or crossing between parked cars with limited visibility as well, which is not a real safe situation. To address this issue, staff recommends prohibiting parking, as I said, along the south side of Franklin between Washington Street and Prospect, and on the east side of Elm from Prairie to Franklin, and to converting the opposite side into no parking anytime, and to have it be no parking anytime, as I said, between April 1st and November 1st. A letter was sent to each resident explaining this. Staff did receive positive comments from the residents who responded to that. It was also presented to the Transportation and Parking Commission on July 9th. The commission voted 4-1 to approve this from April 1st to November 1st. And if staff, if this is approved, what staff will do is sign it, and we'll continue to evaluate the operation here, evaluate, how far parking moves, if there's issues on Elm Street to the south, and we'll continue to evaluate and address any additional parking issues that remain. So with that, I'd be happy to turn it over for any questions.
Terrific. Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the proposed parking restrictions? Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. I hope in addition to monitoring this, which is great, we'll also reach out to the Park District and see if we can encourage folks to use the parking lot that's there at the corner of Prairie and Washington. I know that was one of the items that was mentioned at TAP. Yeah, I think it's, while we can't necessarily force anybody to park there, it would be helpful if more folks took advantage of the parking that's there and maybe walk the extra block as opposed to parking on Franklin or Elm. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the Village Council? I think you're short of a couple of rebounds and a couple of assists, Commissioner Olson. Go for it.
Parking on Washington, parking on Prairie Avenue is currently restricted, and no parking any time. Is that correct, in that section north of the park?
I would have to double check that it is on every block.
Okay. So, I guess my, I agree with Commissioner Jose that we should encourage people to use the lot, but we also, before the next meeting, if you could get me information on the Prairie Avenue parking restrictions and what parking restrictions are on Washington Street, that'd be appreciated.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that, and we can discuss next week. Thanks.
Commissioner Rankin.
Well, I think that we can encourage people to park in certain areas, but they probably are just going to park in the closest area that they can to where they want to be. So I'm looking forward to see how this helps with the situation, and if it doesn't, I'm confident that we'll come back and address it again and figure out some other ideas to help the residents in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Having heard that, any final questions or comments from the audience? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, 9C. Please.
9C and 9D were really introduced by our bond counsel earlier in the public hearing. They both relate to the supportive living facility development proposed for Lacey Avenue. Item C is the bond ordinance agreement, or excuse me, authorization to issue bonds. Item D is the authorization of the agreement that supports that bond issuance. I would describe this project as the same development with the new developer. And I'd like to take this opportunity for the principals for the new developer to introduce themselves to the community and the council. Chuck Freeberg and Jim Martell are here this evening. Welcome the opportunity if they'd like to introduce themselves to the community.
Chuck Freeberg.
Gentlemen, if you could please come to the podium, otherwise the fine people at home won't have a chance to hear you, and I wouldn't want them to be disappointed. So thank you for doing so, and welcome. Glad to hear you here tonight.
My name's Chuck Freeberg. I'm a former partner at William Blair, specializing in financing supportive living facilities, all kinds of tax-exempt bonds, multifamily bonds. In this case, I'm one of the principals, one of the new owners, and that's by way of background. My experience with supportive living facilities goes back into the 90s, early 2000s for the supportive living facilities. And we certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here before you today, supporting this very worthwhile facility. And any questions you'd have of us, that's why we're here tonight. Jim Martell will come up and say a few words as well. And go ahead, Jim.
Good evening. Welcome, Mr. Martell.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. I'm Jim Martell. I'm the president of Ridge Development Corporation here in Chicago. I've been in the development business for about, this will be my 40th year of developing throughout the Midwest. We have offices as well in Los Angeles, Dallas, Atlanta, and Monterrey, Mexico. So we've been involved on a nationwide basis in developing all product types. My history with supportive living and subsidized housing goes back into my early days in the mid-'70s. We started out doing Section 8 housing throughout the Midwest, providing homes for low-income families and seniors, and had a very adverse program, building several of them throughout the Chicagoland area, as well as throughout the states of Wisconsin and Minnesota. So we're very pleased to becoming active with Chuck, who's worked with me for the last 30 years on financing and so forth, and coming together and be part of your community and building this supportive living facility, and very excited to work with your staff and see this through. We hope to be underway in mid to late September.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the project after, obviously looking forward to it for some time.
Thank you.
Please, thank you. Appreciate you being here, appreciate the introduction as well as those comments, gentlemen. Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the project, this item? Good evening.
Good evening, Anthony Chang, 5507 Aubrey Terrace. I was looking over the materials and I noticed that there was a section that said that the financing team discovered an issue with one of the original, with the owners of the borrower that would have been made the sale of the public bonds difficult. I'd like to ask what that particular difficulty was, and were there any particular lessons learned or any way that we can help to prevent this from occurring in the future if there is such a way to prevent that?
It's a great question for the developer.
That's what I was going to say. I don't know if, gentlemen, you'd like to take that one? But I think that volley has landed in your court.
Sure, I'll try to answer that. I think the complexity of these projects is really the crux of why Chuck and I have become a partner in the transaction. It takes a tremendous amount of expertise to understand all the HSS rules for supportive living and the Medicaid rules and regulations, as well as structuring the project financing, the tax-exempt financing, as well as the tax credit financing that takes place with the project. Further is just the complexities of dealing with, this is a complicated site, as you probably all know. Mm-hmm. So it takes a little more expertise in terms of development expertise to go through the process. The building itself won't be too complicated once we come out of the ground, but it's just the site itself presents some challenges. So I think the existing team recognized that it would be better off to have a partnership of Chuck and I in the project to ensure that we would be able to pull the financing together as well as complete construction on time and on budget. So I think there was more of a decision on the expertise, the capital support that we have, and expertise in the financing that brought us together with the current team.
I appreciate that answer. I think what the takeaway there is it's a difficult and changing landscape to navigate, and the fact that we're still headed towards the finish line, I think, is a good thing to be welcomed.
Yes, I hope I answered the question.
Yes, that was a satisfied nod. Yes. Thank you for the question. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Olson.
I think we've discussed sufficiently the bond. Has any property changed hands in this transaction to date? The Donegal property, more specifically?
Not yet.
Okay, so no properties change hands, thanks. I want to, the one thing I just want to make clear, my understanding of this from comments, we're not building Section 8 housing here. This is, this is not, I think residents in the area would be concerned. This is effectively senior living for people in our community and for people who want to stay in Downers Grove for the long term. That's my understanding of the project. This gives opportunities for people to stay in Downers Grove who may not otherwise be able to. So that's just to assuage any concerns.
That's correct.
Yeah, this is the same project that we've seen several times in terms of, in that regard.
That's all I have.
Other questions or comments from the council?
Thank you,
Very
Mayor.
good. Next item, please, 9D as in David.
That was actually covered as a
That is
package
fine.
with the last one, so that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the first reading. Thank you very much. Brings us to item 10, the mayor's report. I have no report at this point in time, so we'll go right to the mayor's report. Item 11, Mr. Fielding.
I also have no report, Mayor. Thank you.
And that, of course, brings us to item 12, village attorney, Ms. Petrarca.
I do have a report, only 2 items though this evening. First is an ordinance amending parking restrictions on Franklin and Elm, and the second is an ordinance authorizing issuance of Village of Downers Grove multi-housing revenue bonds for the Downers Grove Supportive Living Facility Series 2014 in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $20,114,920 and related matters.
Splendid. Thank you very much.
That is all. Thank you, Mayor.
That brings us to item 13, council member new business. Do any members of the village council have any items of new business they would like to bring forward at this time? Hearing none. We cannot adjourn tonight. We need to adjourn into executive session. So I will ask for a motion to do so, please.
Mayor Tully, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C5 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the village or whether a particular parcel should be acquired. I further move to convene into closed sections pursuant to Section 2C6 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the village.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. We are convening in closed session for those purposes. Thank you and good night.